Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. Sorry, we got chatting offline. And then it was like, maybe we should get on. Okay. Good morning, Gloria. So where to start? Should we start with the good news or the bad news?
I think the good news is always the same.
Right. I think the bad news is where we start. The bad news is, well, I guess what you would consider bad news, what people would consider bad news, from the perspective of what we've been seeing in consciousness. I mean, let's just start in the most basic manner, which is if you're holding out hope to think that these elections are actually going to change anything, regardless of what the outcome is, then you are going to be very disappointed.
Right.
And that I'm pretty certain about. I think we're pretty certain about. And many of us who do this kind of work or we focus on looking at the bigger picture, a lot of us are feeling the same way. And it has nothing to do with the person in office. It has to do with the set of lessons that we have chosen to complete at the collective, and we have not completed them yet. The ones that have caused all of this upheaval and discomfort, everything else. So,
Well, and that immediately makes me think of, okay, so we need to rush in and make it all better.
Right.
That brings me to what we talked about on Friday in our talk, the cleanup crew.
Yeah. Right. And so, like, from taking it to the big collective. Good morning, Yasmin. Maybe from the big collective. So, like, we just wanted to open with that because everybody, that's the conversation of the month, right?
Right.
In the United States, anyway, probably the rest of the world, because they want to see what kind of a joke this election turns out to be, right? But, it's not being judgmental, it's not being biased, but from the understanding of the bigger picture is nothing is really going to change. Even if the face changes, the lessons are still going to be the same.
Exactly.
So we're not running away, and it's like we see all these memes out there that's like, oh God, can we just put 2020 to bed and blah, blah. And it's like, guess what? It's not going to end in 2020.
Right.
I'm sorry. It's not going to end in 2021. It's going to continue on until we're ready to be done with it. Right. So the question is, are you ready to be done with it? Well, so we're like, well, what is it that's still, making us irritated? So this is what Sarah and I started talking about on Friday, which was, 6 months ago. So
exactly.
And that's where the cleanup crew thing came, because both of us were talking about different situations. Like you had some bigger ones that really sort of hit you in the face all at the same time, where I realized I had just little ones that I've been just sort of like flicking away, like it's a gnat that's annoying me. And part of it had to do with, so we choose to transcend all of the muck, right?
Right.
And that was how we started talking about it. Because I'm like, I feel like I've been doing a really good job at surfing over the muck and I can look down and see it.
Right.
Right. But there are moments when I sort of get pulled down. And the moments when I get pulled down are when I believe I have to manage something.
Right. Exactly.
And so then I have to put my hands down in it, and then I get pulled down into it. And I've gotten better. So I've gotten better at that, where it doesn't irritate me anymore. But at the same time, it's still using up a lot of my time because I'm having to manage 3D situations and 3D interactions and whatever. And then we realized, oh, well, there's a challenge with that. And here's the self-sabotage, is that we feel like even though we're transcending and we talk about doing things a new way, living things a new way, seeing things a new way, we're still acting the same way that we used to act.
Right. So while we're trying to stay above the fray, we still have to interact with it just to day-to-day activities.
Or we believe we do, right?
Right.
Because
we're behaving that way. We're behaving.
We're behaving that way because where's the, because and it turned out to be what? Expectation, which we've talked about bajillions of times, that expectation is connected to ego, right?
Right.
And
beliefs, which are attached to the ego.
Right. Right. And so, I was like, even little things like, because our postal service really stinks right now because of all the junk that's going on because of, this stuff. And so there are things I've ordered that I need that, then I'm like calling and nagging these people, but it's not them because it's the postal service.
Right.
So it's between
Right.
here and there. It was something else that I had, that I sent regular posts that I needed to get someplace within a couple of days. It took a week and a half.
Right.
So in the week and a half, we were waiting for it to get there. I ended up sending it again with priority. And then the other thing showed up, right? So the thing is, and so we say, what? Oh, well, how do I manage? Well, I have to manage that, right? I have to manage. I have to manage it. But do we, is the question.
Right. Right. Do we have to make it better? And I know we say, well, I'm making it better for myself. So in the long run, it is, for the best, but that still perpetuates something that that the goal is to step away from and to stop giving our energy to.
Right. And your comment that brought up the cleanup crew is like, yeah, I'm tired of being the, blank, 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 blank cleanup crew.
Exactly.
And yet we're the ones who create the fact that we believe we need to be the cleanup crew, right?
Right.
Because we say, oh, well, but I want it this way, and I want it in this manner, and I want it in this time, and I want it in this cost, right?
I want it to look like this and wear this and smell like this and taste like this.
Exactly, right. All control, all limitations, all old expectations.
Right.
Instead of saying, okay, well, oh, that was my phone. Well, there's my point, bam. Yeah, instead of like just, well, okay, what if I just don't? What if I don't manage it?
Right.
Well, then it doesn't get done, then it doesn't blah, blah, and it's like, okay, well, and then what?
Right.
And it's sort of like the other thing I was thinking about a little bit over the weekend around this is, so we think all these things are so important to get done, right?
Right.
Or to have taken care of or whatever. Well, it's like I had a conversation several weeks ago with somebody who is obsessed with how much money they have in the bank. I mean, like to this degree of, they talk about it all the time, right? And I finally said, well, what does it matter?
Right. What if all that's worthless tomorrow?
And that's what I said. I was like, so what happens if we have a whole crash of the financial institution? And think of all of the energy, all of the things you sacrificed, all of this, so that you could just say, I have this number in the bank for,
so I can have this false sense of security.
Right. Well, then what happens when that whole bank system just collapses and then there's the dollar's worth nothing, right?
Right. Well, and already there are certain stores or businesses that no longer accept cash.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, my father was always like, well, I'm gonna, every check I get, I'm taking apart and I'm gonna put it in my closet and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, and if nobody accepts it, what's it worth?
Which is so strange to me that many don't seem to be noticing that. Right. I've seen a lot of signs that say, cash accepted or whatever. And I'm like,
right.
That's ridiculous. Right.
I know. And I believe technically it's against the law because on each thing it says this is legal tender.
Right. Right. But nobody's questioning that.
Well, because the COVID rules supersede law.
Well, or we've allowed it to. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
So,
but that's just an example of the things that we believe, like we've talked about before, like they would never shut everything down. Boom. Done.
Right.
They would never cancel school. Boom. Done. They would never do this. They would never do all. And it happened.
Right.
And it happened. So you can't say that'll never happen.
Right.
Because we just don't know.
Right. Right. And what is Yeah. So like that whole point about the financial, it isn't to just say throw away money and everything else, but it's like there are many who are like obsessed with that. Like, I need to have this much money in the bank. I need to do this.
Right.
And then they do all this sacrificing they will for like later on, right? What if there is no later on?
Right.
And it's not that I'm saying to go one way or the other. The thing is to ask, and I asked early on when I did this over a decade ago, because we saw a whole bunch of stuff coming, right? And I
Right.
remember asking, is there anything for me to do or be or um or what? And I got like, is it like this, should I have a backpack ready? Should I have, in case of like, blah blah, should I? And basically the answer I got was every time I asked was, you will have, as long as you trust and listen, you'll have exactly what you need exactly when you need it.
Right. Right.
And that's of course been a decade of constantly having to learn that or relearn that and learn how to trust it. Yeah, Gloria said, I think they're doing it about the COVID. Yeah, well, they're putting everything to that, right? But
Right.
it's actually,
For everything.
but it's not, that's the answer for everything, to shut everybody up. But the actual thing is that's really what they've been planning. And we're not going to go into that. That's a whole different
Yeah,
discussion.
right.
But
One of the things that I noticed that we talked about on Friday is that in order to keep the belief that we had to be the cleanup crew in place, we designed consequences to keep us aligned with the expectation that we need to be the cleanup.
right.
So if we step back and then start looking at those consequences and maybe take it from that perspective of conquering the belief from the expectations of the consequences.
Well, and that's the really challenging part to take to pull apart, right? Because people say, well, what do you mean don't manage it the same way? What if the bills don't get paid? What if, this doesn't get done, or the food shopping doesn't get done, or the laundry, or whatever, right? Or what happens if, I don't micromanage this situation so that I get what I ordered, or
Right.
that I'm
Right.
expecting, or yeah, like there's 1,000 different things, because that's what we do to justify the continuation of that interaction, right? Which is,
Right. Right.
well, but then it'll just fall apart. Well, here's the funny thing. After we were talking about that on Friday, so here's my here's my funny thing, right? So look, I have my roots going on here, right? So I'm waiting for my hair dye that comes in, that I have automatically shipped to me once every, I think it's every 5 or 6 weeks. It was shipped. And this is just one of many examples, but then these, to me, they're littler. You had like some bigger ones last week, and I was like, yeah, but this was one of many things that have come up just constantly that we're managing. So it was shipped out to me a week ago, last month, 2 weeks ago, this Wednesday. And usually I used to get it before the COVID thing. I used to get it within 2 days of it shipping. Bam. Well, then it became like a week. Oh no, 5 days. Then it became like 5 days. Right. And now it's almost 2 weeks. Right. So on Friday we were talking, I'm like, yeah. And so I've chatted with them, and they said, oh, well, we're not going to do anything to see what we can do until like the 23rd, which was Friday. But then I forgot to call them because I had a really full day on Friday. And then I was like, oh crud, it's the weekend, blah, blah. So anyway, here's the thing. I was forced to not do anything about it.
Right.
And not call them back because I had chatted with them. So here's the thing. I took time out of my day to say, hey, the thing hasn't been updated since it was shipped. I looked at the tracking information. It's sort of like hang out there. And all they said to me was, oh, well, we won't do anything about it until it doesn't show up after the 23rd. So call us back. Right. So basically that was a waste of my time and effort to even do that, to call them to begin with. Right.
Right.
Because there was some kind of guidelines they had that I had no idea about. So, whatever. So then I never had a chance to do it. And then all weekend I'm like, oh crap. And I didn't know, I was like going to check, is there customer service? Da, 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 da. Anyway, I checked the tracking this morning. It's supposed to deliver today. So whether I had called or not made no difference, because maybe they would have sent me another one. I don't know. Maybe I should still say, hey, send me one so I have a backup for next time.
Right.
But it's, it's just an example of many of the things that have been going on, right? Because, and let's look at some really dangerous areas. Well, I say dangerous because of what people get really offended by or upset by when you say it is,
Right.
well, whether to vote or not vote.
Right. Oh yeah. That's really a hot button.
Right. And, it's like, oh, well, blah, blah, and you can't have change unless you vote. And it's like, really? Because what are we going to change?
Right.
And I have always been adamant about voting. I have done it my entire adult life.
Right.
I don't think I've ever skipped a major election, especially. And actually most election years I vote. So it's like, well, but looking at it now, and really the answer I'm getting is it really doesn't matter because we're still not done with those lessons, and the same thing's just going to happen whether it's a different face or not.
Right.
And many, like, they don't want it. They're like, because I'm like, well, is it, and why is that? Well, because sitting there and putting all this energy to voting for different faces of the same energy, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Is it worth it?
Right.
Because, well, we've been doing that for years, and well, how's that done for us, really, especially the last, decade, probably, right? Or more.
Right.
So, the things that would make change have not happened, and people are just not looking at that, but instead they're looking at this old habit of how we do things and expect changes, right? So I love the quote that you use is change nothing and nothing changes, which is
Right.
It's like, okay, so if we're doing the same thing in the same broken system in the same broken way over and over and over again,
Right.
why do we expect a different result?
Right. And versus trying to make a change, your vote is essentially giving energy to a broken system.
They're perpetuating
Right.
what doesn't serve us or hasn't served us for a very long time. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, there are things that are on the table that anyway. So
look at, okay, take that example and then let's back up and say, okay, what are the consequences of not participating in that? The consequences are is somebody will be elected that we may not want. Well, that's kind of a given anyway.
Right.
Right. So at what point,
regardless of what side you're on, right?
Exactly. So we come to the place where that consequence has to get to the root of the problem.
Right.
And I think no matter who gets elected, that's where we're headed. And so does it really matter whether you participate or not? Actually, I don't believe it does.
Well, I think you're just giving more energy to,
right. The broken system.
Of the broken system, right? And we've come a long way of that in the last several weeks, just because that's some of the guidance that's come in. It's like, well, if we're changing the way we experience and are present, then why would we perpetuate the things that were of the old energies?
Right. Right.
And then people, we could go on a whole trip on that.
Right. I feel like I just went down a rabbit hole on that one.
Yeah. I just saw the big road open up there, and it's like, well, what if we decided to not even recognize the president? What if we decided to not even, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
I mean, at some point, because apparently the president's not recognizing the laws we put in the state, and I'm not even talking about the particular person, but look at what's going on right now in the name of a virus that's affected, less than 2% of the population.
Right. Right. Oh, right.
Right. And it's like, that's what they throw up as the shield. They throw up as the shield, but look at what's going on. Look at the governors. Somebody I knew had talked about somebody that they follow that called all the governors of the United States, like little emperors and empresses, right? That they've become. And it's like, we have thrown our legal system out the window in many cases because we're just like, oh yeah, because of the virus.
Right. As long as you believe that what I'm doing will save your life, it's okay.
Right.
Whatever I choose to do.
Right. So it's okay on that side then for them to say, well, I'm just not going to acknowledge this entire system that was put up
Right.
for the people, whatever, right? And this is not just in this country, by the way, this is all over the world, right?
Right.
But so like, and everybody's been so buried, not everybody, a good portion of the population has been so buried in fear, like, and so convinced to be fearful, right? And to stop thinking for themselves and stop listening to their own guidance, or even less so if they hadn't before, that's really the easy way to put the shield up for anything. Oh, well, it's for the virus, like, oh, well, they're not taking cash because of the virus. They're not doing this because of the virus.
Well, and it all comes back to that. How do I not die?
Right. Which, we're working on in our
Right.
in our course, which is soon to be launched, our online course. So just you wait. But anyway, we are actively working on getting those modules done. So, but the thing is, think about that. So it's okay for people. So first of all, let's convince everybody. Think about that. Let me convince you to put all of your energy to be afraid of dying.
Right. Right.
And to put all your energy to avoid that death and make it sound like such a bad thing and da 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 da. Right? Let me do that. And then I can manipulate you
out of everything,
out of that fear, for anything that I want.
Right. Right. You will give up and abandon your core values in order to stay safe.
So what if we transcended that and say, no, I am not only am I not going to prescribe to that, I am going to totally ignore you as if you don't exist.
Right.
I'm just going to go about what I'm guided to do, regardless of what you say. And this sounds so very anarchist, right? But the thing is, it's time for us, and I'm not talking about creating violence in any way. I'm not talking about any of that. In fact, I'm talking about just the opposite.
Right, exactly.
Because all the violence is coming from that other end.
Right, right.
And it's like, well, you have your, your really busy scuffle and create all of these distractions. Oh, you have to manage this. You have to do this way. Oh, you have to manage this. Like, wow, look at that from the bigger picture. What if all of these things that we have to manage because things have become more difficult due to the situation we're in, and as just distractions to keep us from seeing the bigger picture, because that's all we're doing is spending our time managing these things that don't serve us anymore.
Right. Right. It consumes us.
Yes.
Right. I did a small experiment on that this weekend. My husband was out of town, so I decided that I was going to take time off and I was not going to do dishes. I was not going to do anything in the kitchen cleanup wise, except the bare minimum, so that freed up time to do the things that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So it was my time off, so to speak. And I would walk in the kitchen and just go, oh, I can't believe I'm doing that. I can't believe I'm doing that. And oh gosh, what if somebody comes in and, and all this judgment just heaping. And finally I was like, so why don't I just go ahead and do it? Because I'm not the cleanup crew today. Today I'm not the cleanup crew. And I kept, and when it came time for me to go ahead and unload the dishwashers and load them back, it took no time versus if I had sat there and eaten away at my time based on the guilt that I was heaping on myself to do that. Mm-hmm. I would have had a totally different experience of the weekend. But as it was, I focused on the things that I wanted to do for myself. Mm-hmm. And it took no time to go back and not suffer any consequence of not cleaning the kitchen every 5 minutes.
Right.
And it was like, I might have to try that again with less guilt, with less judgment, with less, but it was such a big example to me that just because I think things are one way doesn't mean they really are.
Right.
Right. And it's like, I never realized how much that was penetrating my thoughts. you know.
Well, and that's a perfect example of actually something that goes along with an exercise that we talk about in Trinity 1 that we start with, which is the why do you care exercise, right? Why do you care?
Right.
Right. And it really, the thing is, and it's this exercise of, okay, so you're upset about something. Why do you care?
Right.
Right. And it's funny you said that, and it reminded me of a client I had once who was was having issues in her marriage at the time, and so we were looking at like how her husband was making her nuts, right? Because they were both worked full time, and they both had worked full time, and they had twin toddlers, and yeah, I think twins. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, so but she took up so much more because she in her head felt like he's in the medical field, he's more important, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
I should pick up all the other stuff. So she's working full time still and taking care of all this other stuff. Well, then she was talking about how like she's irritated, blah, 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 because he comes home and then like there's a line of clothes to the bed. Like he literally like would leave stuff like on the way into the bedroom and whatever. And I'm like, okay, so what?
Right. That's about him, not you.
Yeah. And then she's like, well then, I spent, and I'm tired, and I'm already dealing with the kids. I'm like, okay, so why are you picking up his stuff? Are you his mother? Why are you even doing it?
Forget the
Right.
mother business.
Right.
It's not even her job either.
That's true. That is true. But then she's like, well, because, and then, the more I pressed, the more it was like, well, what if somebody came in? Like you were talking, what if somebody came in? What if blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and then you're afraid of them judging you. Well, it's not you for them to judge. And that, by the way, it doesn't even matter, because it doesn't matter what other people think of you, because that's where they are.
Right. Right. And it was really a test for me this weekend to go, even if somebody does come, I'm taking vacation, and I'm proud of that. I'm taking this time for me.
Right.
And I would much rather do that than take that time for that belief that the kitchen has to be spotless all the time.
Well, and it's also like when you start looking at that, right, you don't realize how much you are motivated by the fear of others' judgments.
Oh, right. Right. Which I think that, we can tie that all the way back into the election. It's like a lot of people are voting because
it's the right thing to do.
Pressure. It's the right thing to do. And it's like, oh, I created this mess, so this is me helping make it better. My contribution, my voice, contributing to what's broken.
Right. Right. And in all reality, it's up to you. It's up to your own guidance. That's my
Absolutely.
And the thing is, I'm not saying whether to or not. My whole thing is, the day comes and I'm guided to, I will. And if I'm guided to not, I won't. And I'm not going to have any qualms about that. So the thing is to be doing so by guidance and not by, subconscious peer pressure, right? And which is all externalization of our value based on what other people think of us. Right. And so like you're saying, like, can you believe that you would even just have that thought of like, what if somebody came in, right?
Yeah, I know.
And the funniest part is we all dirty dishes.
Right.
And I mean, I have people I know. And the thing is, what's really funny is like most of us who have come to this place of consciousness and observance, like we've become far more accepting of like, okay, like I walk into somebody's house and it's a mess. It's a mess. It's not my business, right? It's not for me to judge. And it is what it is. You live, gone are the 50s days of, oh, here's the outside picture that you're supposed to have and all that kind of stuff. It's like we live in our house. We like, and it was like great because yesterday was my mother's birthday, and so she was coming over for cake in the evening and whatever. And so there was we had 1,000 things going on this weekend. And so I didn't have time to really clean up, but our house is like, we just sort of pick up as we do stuff, right? So it's not, granted, it wasn't spick and span, but it wasn't even, but like there was a time when I would like be making sure, oh, we've got to at least vacuum and do this and do this and do this. And I was just like, it was funny because it was like 15 minutes before she was coming, and I was like, or like an hour before she was coming, because we were just sitting down to eat dinner, and I'm like, It's fine. It didn't bother me in the least. So, and even if it bothered the other person, it's like, well, and it's not like, we're sitting there with, crap all over the place or whatever, but it's also like this level of what these expectations are, right? These old expectations of what things are supposed to look like, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What they're supposed to be appearing to be in the facade of the 3D, right? And the facade within the facade of the 3D, like what it's supposed to look like versus what it really is.
Right.
And so, the question that we have really is, how do we do that? How do we not participate in that, right? Because it's such a deeply ingrained habit.
Right.
So where's the balance of self-love, right? Self-love, being in a place of unconditional self-love, in a place of comfort and peace and centeredness.
See, and I think if you're not there and things don't come from there, none of this works.
Right. Well, right. But the thing is, we're still figuring out how to do that
Exactly.
here, right? Or how to be that while we're here, because it's so deeply, and think about like that we go through that and we're really conscious and observant of everything we're doing. And yet we still have all that chitter chatter that happens, even if it's, 5 shades lower than a lot of others, whatever, but
yeah,
or 50, but it's still this belief that we have to interact in the world the way the world is interacting.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Right.
Instead of interacting in the world in the way for us to shift to lead the way.
Right.
But then the mind says, well, I don't know what that is, because we don't know how to do that. We haven't done that yet. Right?
We haven't remembered that we've done it before.
Yes, we haven't remembered how to do that yet.
Right.
So maybe that's what we do today, is simply have the remembrance on how to be centered and conscious and clear in our guidance of every single thing that we do, free of the underlying motivations based on the old 3D, based on expectations
and consequences, right?
Right.
Of the old 3, right.
And by the way, a consequence is only a consequence if you see it to be one.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And so, instead of saying consequence, what is it we can say instead? We can say, well, what did I learn from this? What can I learn from this? What's the lesson that I'm learning from this? Right? Or what is there?
And it may be totally opposite of a consequence that someone else would observe.
Right. Well, and that goes with the whole bigger picture of seeing things from the higher picture, the higher perspective, because, it makes me think of conversations I've had with others about wealth and money, right? And about the belief that what we consider third world countries are, have a bad life and everything else. And I'm like, sociologically, they've done studies that show that they're actually happier in countries and situations where their lives are much simpler, because they're not attached. They don't have all these other expectations and consequences of blah, 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 and they just sort of live life day to day and in the moment, and they're much happier because they're present with where they are.
Right. And they get to spend more time in nature, and they have so fewer drags on their energy, because we give so much of our energy away.
Yes, to all this other stuff.
Right.
So, we talk about money and whether somebody has money or not, and it's like, well, that can flip in a moment too. B, money is simply an energy, right? And it only holds the energy that we give it, right? So if you give it your worth, then that's how you're going to be worthy, is having it. If you don't, and say I'm worthy intrinsically without needing that to show it, well, then you're going to be supported in so many different ways. And that's such a simple, like, flip of the switch, but so hard for many to get to.
Right.
Because of the depth of those expectations. right? So, it's like talking about, people who, when we're talking about the consequence thing, right? People who don't have money, and then others say, oh, I'll have to give them money. And then it's like, well, did you ask your guidance? Because it might not help them to give you the money.
Right. Right.
Because they might have a belief within themselves that they're not worthy of having money, or they abused power in another life where they had too much money,
Right.
or what they believe they had too much money and too much power, and they abused other people with it. So now they will, no matter how much money you give them, it's just going to flow right away from them, right?
Exactly.
Or they'll self-sabotage.
Right.
So there's all these things that are just so interrelated, and it's all these decisions we make based on what we think we should do, or what's going to be the consequence, or what people are going to think, or how it's going to help others, right?
Right. Right.
Right, because a lot of times we do things so that everybody else is happy.
Right. Right.
And if that's the case, then go back to what we talked about. I think it was last week, or 2 weeks ago, the independence, the extreme independence, or the
Right. Yes.
dependency, right?
Right.
I think that was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so it comes back to this. Okay, how do we be free of, here, and create an entirely new, fresh, effective, productive, conscious way of being while we're embodied here, in a way that's totally divorced from all the old ways, all the old 3D ways and expectations and belief of consequence and all that kind of stuff, because all those are ego-based judgments.
Right. Right.
So maybe that's what we just focus on today, is the consciousness of how to be that differently, and see in everything that we do, every interaction we have, how to be that differently. Because it's sort of like when we talk about, when we allow ourselves to be our divine authenticity, right, 100%,
Right.
and we hold that space of authenticity unapologetically, in a space of unconditional self-love, that we help everything here exponentially, because it gives everybody else and everything else permission
Right.
to do that for themselves.
Right. And it brings a different awareness that they might not have had they not been exposed to that vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think that's the first step in all this, is that awareness. And to gain that awareness, if you align with that self-love and that worthiness and that divinity right off the bat, your awareness totally shifts to where you see things in a whole different light.
Right. Easy peasy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It can be, if we choose for it to be, but we believe, we have to let go of the belief that it's not easy.
Right. Right.
It's too hard.
Or that there are consequences associated with it.
Right. Oh, well, I could go to jail, I could get killed. Blah, blah. Again, there isn't that motivation of being avoided.
That can happen even if you don't.
Right. And I could just drop dead right now.
That's right.
Because my heart stopped and it's time for me to go. So, so how to live, I guess. So having the clarity on living free of the old ways of managing 3D, and knowing how to transcend that in everything we are and do,
right?
Everything we're being and doing, and what that looks like, and be clear on that in every moment, and be very present with it, and just continue on as we're guided. It's almost like, it's not like you're avoiding looking at it, it's that you're done looking at it. There's
right. And you're looking at it through different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being drawn in, it's more of an observation.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because when we stop putting our energy to recreating and recreating and recreating and looking over here and putting our hands in the muck, then we can really focus on being forward, being what's next, right?
Right.
And it's really a challenge for many to say that they can, like, because I can hear in the collective, like, what do you mean? We have to do this, we have to do this, this is crumbling, we have to hold this up. And
Right.
it's like, we don't have to do anything.
Right.
Right. We believe that if something crumbles, it's a bad thing. Yet it's really allowing something else to be born in its place.
Right. It's the beginning of the new.
Right. Every death is a birth.
Right.
So, you know, and I can't say that I remember what all the answers are, right? Except I know what my answers are.
Right.
And really, it's more for me to listen to my answers, because all of those individual answers add up to a very big collective one. And if we all did that, well, things would shift so much more dramatically and so much more quickly.
Right.
So all of that tied up into a bow,
right,
in a way that's fun and gentle and flowing and easy and complete.
Right.
All right, you ready?
I am ready.
Oh, that took a little while.
Yeah.
Then it became like currents of expansion, which was really nice. For lack of a better term. Felt really good at the end, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Seemed like, from what I observed, was that the more I stayed in that place of observation, unconditional love, that piece of divinity, and stayed in the muck, in that place, the more the muck changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost and the word zombies come to mind, which I'm not a zombie person. But it was like you'd see people rushing around, and then you stand in that energy, and they stop, and things start to shift for them.
Nice.
And that's what I saw in the muck.
Mm.
And it was like, okay.
Yeah, what I saw when we first went out there too was the thing I had forgotten that you brought up when we were talking on Friday about when you first got your scuba license.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. About, doing the open water and going under, and all I could focus on was the particles suspended in the water. And I just freaked out and was ready to surface. And my instructor pulled me back down and said, no, you've got to look beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Look beyond that. And I made it through and got my certification, but
yeah, it's like hold steady.
right.
Yeah. And yeah, keep focused in the long, it's like the long haul, the long,
right. The big picture.
Big picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very tingly. That felt very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck with that, everybody, this week. I mean, I don't say that with sarcasm. I'm just saying.
Practice.
Be observant.
Practice.
And all these things that you're complaining or feel like overwhelmed with, saying I have to do this and I have to manage this and whatever, step back and say why.
Right. And do I really?
Do I really? And what if I didn't? Okay, I really do because I want this end result and I want to control it this way. Well, then that's an acknowledgement, but then you are now limiting how things turn out by saying I want this expectation, right?
Well, and just admitting that shifts everything.
Mm-hmm. It does. So start looking at even the smallest little tasks, the smallest little things that you're expecting, even with other people, not just things like packages and whatever, but I mean, things in your everyday life that you do based on expectation and on having to manage being the cleanup crew, right?
Right.
Because that was where we started on Friday, was talking about, well, I feel like I'm the cleanup crew. I'm tired of being the cleanup crew, right? So on that, be observant, come back and do this clearing again if you need to, like 100 times.
Right.
I know that's the intention of creation I'm going to hold this week. So, and then we'll report back next week because I'm sure there'll be something else. There always is. Whatever's next. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni
signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a good one.